And welcome back to another episode of the Geek Centurions. Me, your boy Eli.
It's me, Joe.
And so, recently, not too long ago, they announced the Oscars. We're not talking about the Oscars, thank God, because I don't have the patience for that, for something like that. But they did recently talk about some of the animation categories, that being Turning Red, Puss in Boots. I think there's another one I'm probably forgetting. Oh, Shelley, the Seashell one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, from 824. And what I'm about to say Benicio del Toro, but I mean Guillermo del Toro is Pinocchio, and so I saw that, and then I was reminded by one of these statements that Guillermo del Toro recently made that essentially made me want to like think about making an episode essentially centered around this. It is the idea of animation as a genre, not as a medium rather than a genre, and obviously that brings up a lot of questions like what does it mean for it to be animation to be a genre? I mean, a medium rather than a genre, and also like what is this perception of animation that a lot of people tend to have? That you know, thankfully we're starting to break barriers, and with a lot of that stuff, but there's still some things we gotta to fight off.
Yeah. Because I think there is sort of I guess I wouldn't say stigma against animated movies, but there is I think a percentage of the population that sort of sees most, if not all, animation as just for children.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of a thought, and like like there can't be any sort of serious storytelling or
Mm-hmm.
to
It's
behind it.
not for adults unless it's made for adults.
Yeah, because like when you think of adult animation, you think of The Simpsons or Family Guy or all those animated sitcoms that are on like the various network TVs
Like Adult
channels.
Swim, HBO.
Well, I mean, yeah, like that too. Like just like Rick and Morty is like considered an adult animated show, but it's not like that's like I feel like that's the only way like animation sort of seen as for mature audiences is when there is like I guess with the exception of The Simpsons, like a lot of crassness, you know, cursing and all that sort of
Blood and
stuff.
violence.
Yeah, blood, violence, sex jokes, all that stuff. It's part of the reason I think. Yeah, it's just that's sort of like it's like a weird way of like look at how edgy we are, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like look at how different we are from just regular cartoons. Which you expect are just regular cartoons are for kids, and we're different because we can say all these bad words and show all this blood and like maybe some nudity, not
Mm-hmm.
really, but that sort of thing, and yeah, that is a bit of like a misleading in terms of like how animation is kind of seen, or rather like the ways animation can be used in
Yeah,
order to tell stories and stuff like that.
and like I want to bring that up with like talking with about Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio because last year we had like three Pinocchio movies, and all of them are really weird and different. But I think Guillermo del Toro one stands on top because it's one of those things where because like the one that came out was the one with Pauly Shore, the one that everyone was making fun of because it was just talking about
Yeah, that one was like straight up probably like meant for like straight to DVD.
kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the other one was Disney's
remake.
which was not received very well. It looks very much like what you expect live action Disney movies to be at this point,
Yeah,
based on animated properties. And obviously you have Guillermo del Toro's, which is the one that everyone was talking about because it was so different. It was stop motion. It was fully animated, um, and it had themes that not only were central to what Pinocchio was always about in the books, but also it had a lot of things that made it different. The ending itself is a very different from what you expect from Pinocchio, but also like surprisingly mature themes. I was like, when I was watching, I was like, wow, this is surprisingly adult considering it's supposed to be, or for most people would see it as a sort of like a thing for kids. Because once you hear Pinocchio, you're like, oh yeah, Pinocchio, that's for kids, right? And this one, like, oh no, we're talking about fascism, the idea of life and death. Fucking kid gets killed in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and like, and he gets, but by being killed, I'm like, oh, they drop a bomb on this kid. Oh god, and this, and and Geppetto is a depressed drunk who's he lost his son. He's went to alcoholism, and it's just like really just a destroyed man he is, and it's has a lot of things that are going around. And it's like, oh wow, this is like surprisingly adult. But I think like that comes to the point where Guillermo del Toro was saying like it's a medium, like it's a method of storytelling, right? But it's still something that you can show your kids. The kids are gonna have fun. It's a colorful, fun Pinocchio movie, but it still has like these themes, these like this idea of a very mature story through the lens of like something that you would expect it to be for kids.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there hasn't been any anime movies that are kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like off the top of my head, I can think of like at least a couple, and I think they're mainly sort of like what was it? Secret of Nim kind of has a little bit of a. It's a kids, it's an animated movie, based off of a book that I'm pretty sure was like, and it has a lot of darker elements to it because it's like a whole thing about like rats being experimented on and they gain intelligence and blah blah blah, and there's some various elements of like there's various like themes going on there, and it's just like this one rat what was her name, Miss Frisbee?
Yeah, the mom.
Yeah, who has to go out and just help one of her sons because he's super sick, and she has to find some way to help him, and she goes on this sort of long trek adventure, just going through all these sort of harrowing scenarios just to save her son. And there's a lot of themes and elements there too that you could consider it to be a bit more mature than you would normally think, and as well as sort of the animation itself. I think by Don Bluth and his whole studio, it holds up in that sort of regard. And yeah, clearly there is more to it than just talking rats just going on a little adventure. No, there's a bit more stakes to it, and I think that's really sort of just evidence of I guess Guillermo del Toro's sort of thinking of animation being a medium, because or just animated films in general, because like there is a lot of ways animation can be used in a lot of ways to tell different types of stories. I mean, yeah, you can have just those very child friendly sort of
yeah, something like I guess you would kind of relate to Disney.
Yeah, like not super. Like I would imagine like some of like Disney's earlier works maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine like just having that sort of meant for kids kind of thing. And I guess just to stray away from movies a little bit, a lot of like kids programming, especially for younger audiences, kind of has that sort of feel of like they're like mostly just nursery rhymes and that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're meant for like kids. Like this is for your kid to watch while you go do something. It'll sit them down for the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's also just sort of evocative of like some of the other stuff that's been on the rise with the internet too. Like all those, I remember when there was the Baby Shark song or whatever, or I think I don't even know what it's called, but it's just like these animated like music shorts with these little kids.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that like parents just put on their phones for their kids just to watch, because again, they're like, hey, watch this while I, to calm you down while I have to do other things, which I think is sort of like, I think something that we'll circle back to, but it is one of those, I think that's partially the reason why I think some people like to say that animation in general is for kids, because there is so much content like that for kids, but clearly, we have places where there's more to it than that. Like, there's various movies that can showcase deeper themes and more interesting, thought-provoking scenarios with the use of animation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that statement because like one anime film that always comes to mind that is based on like it's one's based on a comic book, but it's also based on like the life of this young Islamic girl, Persepolis. That was a movie that you can totally show it to a kid and they'll enjoy it. They might not understand like what's going on, but like it's one. But if you're an adult, you can be like, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, okay, it's a mature story told through animation, and I think what a lot of people tend to forget about with animation is that you can get away with a lot of stuff. And I don't mean like sex and violence. I'm like no, you have this sort of imagine it, with animation and art and all that stuff. You're able to like fully expand on that sort of realm of your imagination, like stuff that you couldn't really do with live action. And and what matters is also you can still help it with the writing. We talked about this before with the Lion King. When they made the live action version, where Simba being a lion, I'm going to call him a tiger. Um, in the original, the amount of expressions he can make, the movements of some things that can only be done through animation, and you wouldn't get the same feeling if you saw it live action because that's not how that works.
First of all, I would like to state that technically the remake is not live action.
Okay, fair. It's said that when I did.
I'm just saying, like, I get people like to say that, but it's not. They're all just 3D realistic models.
Mm-hmm.
But you are correct in the statement that in the original, because it is 2D hand drawn animation.
Not saying and not saying you can't do this with 3D.
Can't. Yeah, it's not saying you can't do it in 3D, but because the movie is so hell bent on looking as realistic as possible,
mm-hmm.
That means you can't pull off all these various expressions and like facial features of that you would see in the original Lion King on a realistic looking lion. Because that looks so uncanny. Because you're like, hey, wait a minute, a lion doesn't look like that. Now I remember there are mock-ups of that are online where like people made it more similar to the design of the Disney of the original, like but as a 3D model, which works a bit better. But I mean,
it's not what the person intended.
No, it's not what Jon Favreau or any of them else intended because. Weirdly enough, like it's weird because it feels like in the movie that they did this before with the Jungle Book.
Yeah,
it kind of was all right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess partially because I feel like in the Jungle Book there were some a bit exaggerations with some of the like at least some of the designs of some of these characters, especially with I think what's his name, King Louis.
Yeah, King Louis was a freaking giant.
Yeah, he's a giant ass. I think he's supposed to be in the movie, in the remake, he's supposed to be a Gigantopithecus.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're still able to like give him some like weird like facial features without having it. Like it still looks realistic, but he's able to, I think, pull it off well.
Mm-hmm.
At least the animation team behind it. But yeah, with the Lion King remake, they went hella hard on trying to make it look as realistic as possible. And yeah, it just does not look right. Like it wouldn't look right for them to even like make these lions like smile or do those expressions. That's why everybody says that like, well, this looks so emotionless. It's like, yeah, of course it's emotionless because these animals, you made these animals look too realistic. They can't emote like we can. And yeah, that is sort of like the big thing. Like you were saying, that animation can promote you to do a bunch of stuff that normally can't be done in live action. You can express a lot of things way more fluently than in, say, a live action movie and stuff.
And like, and just to say, not just to say like that being realistic isn't impossible. There's other forms of animation you can use to make that work. Rotoscope has been a thing for years. You know, the works of why am I forgetting his name? The
Basky?
guy Basky is like,
But no, it's I mispronounced it, but I know what you're talking about. The guy who did the those old school Lord of the Rings movies.
yeah, and he did like a lot of other stuff that was like way like super adult and stuff. Like you can look at his work and like it's like wow, like he did stuff with animation that like normally not a lot of people would do. Like even especially with rotoscoping, because you can look at those old the old animated Lord of the Rings movies. That one specifically, not the Bass was it Reagan Bass ones. But those are still pretty good. Yeah, but the one he made, that one was like a level of like artistic, you know, idea that went into there. You know, mixing 2D with rotoscopes and like having that sort of fear, especially installed in there really well with the wraiths. But yeah, no, it's weird to me that a lot of people just don't really consider animation to be that sort of like important, or they just view it as sort of one thing, especially nowadays, because like there's this sort of rise. And granted, this might be more of like the older generations and stuff. Younger people might see it differently. I think like for us when we were growing up, we had stuff like Batman the Animated Series, and I'm blanking out on some of the stuff. But there was a lot of like stuff that was not only on TV but also like movie wise, that, you know, going back to them, like, oh wait, this is actually a lot more mature than I thought it was.
I mean, yeah, I guess you could argue like stuff like the Iron Giant back in the day.
Oh yeah,
that's that.
Yeah, because like when I was watching as a kid, I never knew, and because this, you know, I didn't have, you know, I was a kid, I didn't know anything, man. I was just a kid. I didn't realize like what the time period was and how much all the stuff around there made sense as to the fear of the Iron Giant.
Yeah, because the movie is basically set in the 50s, and there is there's a lot of Cold War tensions. Obviously, you have alien stuff going on with the Iron Giant. You know, like a lot of details you probably wouldn't notice make a lot more sense when you realize, oh, the setting's in the 1950s. Okay, that's why certain things are the way they are in this movie or whatever.
There's a certain reason why that art guy is dressed like Andy Warhol without the white hair,
and why they call him a beatnik and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you know, there's that. I know. I guess even though this was probably a bit later in our development, but Avatar: The Last Airbender came out like in 2007, 2008, I think. But we were still, definitely in that age range of being able to watch that stuff and being invested in stuff. Because you are right. There was at least a couple of that sort of shows of like, here's kids shows, but they use the medium of animation to do all these things and actually tell like a bit more of a proper story rather than just being sort of just and not to say anything about like stuff from the 80s, but like
a little more mature writing.
Yeah, a bit more mature writing and stuff.
Yeah, because like you and I have talked about this before, especially with Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's like a lot of that earlier, especially that first season, that was very not I would say kid friendly, but like sort of like
there was a bit more
like
lightheartedness.
Yeah, like it's an adventure, guys, cool stuff. And then like as you start going in, it's like, oh, there's a lot more messed up stuff going on, child abuse, war crimes, genocide, and all that stuff. And like, not to say you couldn't do that in live action, of course. Like, you know, there's a second attempt going on right now, but like you can tell this story through animation, or like live action. It just depends on what medium you choose. And obviously, I think animation was the one that would make sense considering the stuff they wanted to do, especially
with all the effects and the fights and all that stuff.
Yeah, and like the fact that it's very anime inspired. with a lot of the art design and a lot of the themes around there. And you can go even further than that with Korra, which came out around the time when I was in college or going into college, and that had more, much more bright animation, yes, but it started going into more of like a mature, like, self doubt, anxiety, and a lot of other stuff that you're like, oh wow, this is actually, again, this is something you look at and you're like, this is intended for kids. And yeah, we're still talking about TV shows, but this also goes into like movies and stuff. But like there's themes that like as an adult you're like, oh wow, that's what's going on. I totally get it now. This is like something that I wouldn't get as a kid, but I would still enjoy it because one, it looks cool, fight scenes are awesome, and like it's a cartoon, but also it's a cartoon that I as an adult can enjoy.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I think is and to make this more of an interesting discussion, because as I know there's probably some people thinking about, well, what about anime?
Yeah.
Because and I think it's because most if you look into anime and stuff, they're like anime is definitely more of a like I think sticks a lot to the idea of a medium than a genre, because anime is it's Japanese animation straight up. Like it's called anime because that's just how it is in Japan. Hell, Japan will call anything animated anime. Friggin' SpongeBob, if that shows up on there, they call it an anime. Same thing with like King of the Hill and stuff. It's called anime over there. That's just for at least the Japanese perspective.
Anime is short for animation for them.
Yeah, like
France is the same. Well, they don't call it like anime over there, but like they're also one of the leading people in terms of like animation. Like where it's just not a genre; it's a medium for them.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to that sort of debate, I think it's really more focused on the U.S. and various other like Western countries, I guess. I mean, France is obviously a Western country, but I feel like the U.S. and like say U.K. are probably the two countries that people think about. That this conversation of like animated movies and shows and stuff, that's just for kids kind of thing props up the most. But then it's like, well, look at anime. There's like anime for kids and stuff over there.
Doraemon is a thing.
Yeah, Doraemon's fucking super popular over there. Like hell, like kid friendly show. But then they have all the shonens and all that sort of
crazy stuff.
Yeah, you got your Naruto's, your Dragon Balls, which are like for younger or like teenagers, I guess, like young teenage boys.
And then you have stuff like that's Berserk, Chainsaw Man.
Yeah, for a bit older audiences, and then you get like, you get that same effect, but with like girls and stuff with like Sailor Moon and like. What was that one? Madoka Magica, I guess.
Right? Yeah, like the magical girl stuff. Like it's really meant for as a medium over there, and I think people give it a pass because whenever they think of anime, they think of like, oh, it's clearly for like mature people because like there's fighting, there's blood, cursing, but it's like, no, that show's meant for kids.
Yeah, like straight up, like shonen is like Japanese for like young teenage boy, basically, which is like around 12 to 15.
Yeah.
So that's still technically, if you want to get technical, young audiences, right?
Yeah. Listen, if you're like a 20-something-year-old and you're watching Naruto or My Hero, you're watching something that's made for that intended audience. But you know why you're staying in? It's because the story is engaging for you, not only for kids, but also for adults, because that's kind of like what they essentially want. A story that can be enjoyed by most, and in the sense that it's a story that everyone can relate to, right?
Yeah, and that's why I feel like at least the conversation when it comes to like, oh, like animation just for kids, it feels like it's just mainly just based in the US and stuff. And I think part of that is sort of like when you kind of dwell into the history of animation in the US, because like not to bring up the 80s or anything, but like a lot of 80s shows back in the day were just toy commercials. You
Mm-hmm.
know, your Transformers, your He-Man, TMNT, all that stuff was like basically just toy commercials. Like, hey, here's some new characters. You can get their toy figures and you can do whatever you want with those.
Mm.
And I think that's sort of like, I guess, sort of stigmatized, at least in the U.S. audience, of like, oh yeah, these are just for kids, kid shows,
Yeah.
because yeah, all the kids are watching this and they
And
want to.
and it happens a lot within like other groups, places too. Like it's not just in a U.S. thing. Like, and going back to the anime thing, where so like it's no secret I'm a fucking Gundam fan, right? Um, Around the time when Gundam came out, it was still considered a kids show, even though this was a show that was essentially a story about war. The main character goes through PTSD. A lot of war crimes are committed. A lot of stuff happens in that show. Oftentimes they would like essentially like stand on their soapbox and be like, "War is bad," kind of stuff.
War's bad, guys. Look at all the dead.
Look at all the dead. One scene I remember vividly is like, "Oh yeah, the kids, they're those work orphans, they're gonna be okay. We're just gonna put them in the playroom," and it immediately cuts to like all the sad orphans on the ground crying about their mom and dad being gone, and I'm like, "Oh god, this is this is supposed to be a kids show." Because like it was a show about a giant involving a giant robot, and what sells a giant robot toy. So like it's a lot of that, and I think it's also that the fact that hey, we never really grew out of that idea that cartoons, whether it be like for TV or for movies, can be something that's also can be enjoyed by adults. Transformers is now something that is also enjoyed by adults.
Well, yeah, now like because nowadays, because I can think of say Transformers Prime. That's not to say that I think that was a more mature story for Transformers, but it definitely was taking that similar route to say back in the anime series and stuff, having a bit more like respect for the lore and stuff. I mean, I know the comics as well had delved a bit more deeper and had more serious topics and stuff. And heck, when I look back at it, Bumblebee, the prequel movie that's now basically a reboot to the Transformers movies, does have a neat sort of like through line with its main character, the girl, I forget her name, but she's sort of dealing with the loss of her dad and her mom moving on to a new stepdad and that sort of thing. It's very much like I feel she's going through that sort of like depression of like losing a family member, and that's sort of like that narrative through line of the movie, how she's gonna have to deal with that and all this stuff, so yeah, a lot more of a, I guess, emotionally mature story than say the other Transformers movies, which feature Shia LaBeouf just trying to get laid.
Yeah, and like, and again, like that goes to my point. Like even then, like that's a live action one, yes, but like, you had like what was that movie? Nine from Tim Burton.
Oh my! No, was it? No, it was it. I think it was produced by him, not directed, right? Or
Yeah, produced. It's one of the two. That was another one that was like surprisingly a more mature, like animated movie, right? And there's also Coraline. Anything made by essentially made by that Studio Leica.
Yeah, Studio Leica. They definitely sort of have the ball in terms of like creating those sort of things.
Like surprisingly mature stop motion animation. Because like I remember like Coraline, I love that movie, and seeing as more of an adult, I'm like, this is kind of fucked up. And like I remember hearing the story, it was like that the editor read it because it was originally a book. The editor read it to his daughter, wondering if it was too scary or good enough for kids. But the daughter was like, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to make you mad. But yeah, that story scared me, and I'm like, yeah, looking at it, I can totally see why a kid would be scared of this movie.
No, you're not wrong, but that actually reminds me of a quote by I think Don Bluth back in the day, where I I think it sort of sums up, I think, his thoughts on animated films in general, where it's like, you can show a kid anything as long as there's a happy ending.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people are like, yeah, but life isn't that happy. I'm like, nah, but this is a story. It's fine to have something good happen. You know, it's not real life.
Yeah, it is. I think it was sort of his way of like allowing, because yeah, some of his movies, like I think Land Before Time, definitely has some moments that are kind of like a little dark. But
don't we see the mom get killed by a T-Rex?
I think so. Well, not. I don't think she's like straight up like eaten alive or whatever, but she does die.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is like lots of those, heavy themes of loss and stuff. But at the end, these characters are able to like at least live a bit more happier lives and move on and stuff. And I think that's what he sort of means. Where like you can show, various struggles for these characters, but as long as it sort of ends for them on a happy note, yeah, a kid can enjoy that, because at the end of the day, yeah, you don't want, like, I guess the idea is like most kids don't want to be depressed when they watch something.
Yeah.
So seeing something where it's like, oh, they're going through some struggle, but at the end of the day,
it's a nice life lesson.
They made it through.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can move on, you can survive, and that's sort of, I think, what he sort of means by that.
Yeah, no, and even then, there's been like a lot of quotes and like kids can take it. It can be surprisingly mature sometimes. It just kind of depends on how they're taught and raised. But like to make a point, I feel like a lot of people tend to forget that, hey, this it's still a story. It's whether it be fiction or nonfiction. That it's a story that can be enjoyed by anyone, and that's essentially what you want. And hey, some people are gonna have problems with something. They'll find something to be a complaint about or whatever, and especially nowadays. Yeah, you said you wanted to come back to something.
Crap. Well, I think it was more of a. No, I think it was mainly just that that sort of talk about like how when we sort of think about adult animation, right? It's always like the cursing and just a bunch of that stuff, but like clearly I feel like there's been like various moments where that like you said yourself earlier with the Pinocchio movie, like Guillermo del Toro, the various themes and plots going on there seem way more adult than, say, Family Guy, right?
Yeah.
Because I think people misconstrue adult for, like, being able to curse and, like, do sex jokes and all that stuff. And, instead of just being, like, more mature, like, having more mature themes and, like, in your story. And I think that's sort of like that main sort of crux. 'Cause I think most people commonly think about that, and that's sort of like, I don't know. It feels a bit more demeaning, I guess, because it's like, hey, being an adult isn't all just crash jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's like some serious stuff that goes on, and I think most of those shows don't. Or like most of the stuff that tries to sell stuff as an adult and animated thing don't usually like just focus mainly on the fact that, oh yeah, we can do R-rated jokes and stuff now because we have that rating and stuff,
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I mean, it feels a bit more juvenile when you that's the only thing you do with it,
That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no substance, and like so you saying that actually reminded me of like a moment where I was just hanging out with some friends. We were watching happened to watch because we were talking about The Little Mermaid, right? And we ended up watching ended up watching it, and like there was a moment with Ursula, who is now kind of established to be inspired by drag queens.
Well,
a specific drag queen. I just can't remember the drag queen's name. I apologize if I do, if you guys know. But there's a lot of talk about like Yeah, you gotta find a way to seduce that dude. You know, you gotta use some body language kind of stuff. It's like, oh, that's a mature joke right there.
Well, I mean, that's the thing too, because
Mm.
Disney like is able to, yeah, because they've been able to slip in adult jokes every now and again, and
Mm.
hell, when you think about it, Disney has had some pretty dark moments in those movies when you really think about it. There's definitely a couple that come to my mind, but I think one was in the end of Tangled, the mom.
Oh,
It's
Jesus.
just because her whole thing was like she was using Rapunzel's hair to like keep herself young forever, but now that the hair is gone, that healing power is gone, and now she's slowly, pretty much, just turns into ash.
Yeah,
You
you don't.
know.
The thing is, you don't, and like
Granted, you don't see it happen because she falls off the tower
the
and she's
yeah,
in the cloak, but when the cloak hits the ground, just poof.
yeah. She. That tells you how old she was.
Yeah,
She was centuries old.
yeah, and when you think about it, oh shit, that's pretty freaking dark.
And like it would be a lot more darker. And not saying like we need to be darker or anything. Like
No,
I'm never a fan of like no we gotta up the ante in the darkness. Like no, I'm good. I like some little hope here and there. But like it would be a lot more darker to see her like this like disintegrate slowly like from skin to muscle to bone to ash kind of shit. Don't get me wrong, that would look so fucking cool.
it would. I mean,
It would look fucking amazing. But like one, you probably don't want to get that rating. But also the implication of her being turned to dust is horrifying still.
yeah. I mean, heck,
Because use your imagination. That's the whole point.
yeah, heck, friggin' Tarzan
Oh, yeah, I know what you're
ha-
about.
ends with the main villain Clayton accidentally hanging himself, and all you see is Tarzan's reaction, and then the shadow because it's like raining and thundering.
Yeah,
You see the shadow of a hanging man.
and like I'm gonna be honest, right? As a kid, I didn't even notice the hanging man. I just noticed the sword on the ground
Where he's like,
because that took the
that takes the focus, yeah.
yeah the focus because that's artistic and like if you like and it's a quick second of like a hanged man and it's just like oh shit like I remember watching it back as an adult. I'm like holy shit, damn, is that what happened?
Yeah,
Like
it's
and
like,
as kids we never registered that.
yeah, I think most kids kind of gloss over it because it kind
Yeah.
of happens a lot fast.
Mm-hmm.
The sequence happens like kind of fast, but it is, you can kind of figure, oh yeah, he's probably dead, but you don't know how. But obviously, when you look back at it, oh man, he hung him. He got hung
Mm-hmm.
straight up, and that's sort of like, again, that sort of like counteracts this whole narrative of animated movies being just for kids. And granted, I think Del Toro has said that like, hey, listen, kids can watch the Pinocchio movie. I'm just
Yeah, no, yeah, I've watched.
it's made for everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's this whole point of like animation is genre, and you can do whatever you want with it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Where you can make a film enjoyed by everyone, but it doesn't mean that it's strictly for kids.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly the point of like this whole video, right? Because like you can make something that's for kids. Like I've seen people like watch something that is like intended for kids and like oh that resonated with me. Um, there was that whole conversation of like the what was it? No, scrap it. But yeah, no. Sometimes you'll find something like on as a show or a thing and a movie, and you'll be like, "Oh no, this right here, I get this. This hits somewhere core." Like, what movie was it for me? Encanto was one of those kind of things where I'm like, I was like, you know, it was surprisingly a mature, it's still a kids movie, but there was like a moment where like, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and especially with Pinocchio, that one was another one that was like, oh, I get it, I get it. Because like with Veganta, it was like the scene where the grandmother, how she lost her husband, and like that kind of correlating with the history of that country makes total sense. And same thing with Coco and like all that kind of stuff.
mm-hmm.
It's sort of like really interesting, form of storytelling that's made for everyone. and like but has themes that generally are that everyone can relate to, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Even Turning Red, which I think is another Oscar nominated one. Yes, I did mention that. Where I'm like, oh, I get it. That's clever. It's about mothers and daughters and uh, coming of age, literally, and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, it all makes sense because I didn't really like pay attention to a lot of the marketing. I just knew it was called Turning Red, and she turned into a red panda. And then I was watching, I was like, oh, it's about that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because I didn't pay attention to nothing. All I knew is it's called Turning Red. It's about a girl turning into a red panda. And then I was watching. I was like, oh.
Yeah. No, and then that makes
Mm-hmm.
that sort of leads credence to like
What the Toro was saying.
yeah, and just overall that hey yeah sure this movie is marketed to kids, but like it talks more than just it isn't just a movie about a girl turning into a panda. It has themes. It has
A story to tell.
a story to tell about those themes. Like it's a lot different from again the I guess I would call it the mindless little animated things you put on for your kid when they get cranky on your phone, and it's just some characters singing a song and that's it. There's more to animation than just that. It's kind of like saying film as a whole is just a bunch of blockbusters featuring superheroes and that such, when clearly the film medium has a lot more to it. There's a lot more things you can do with the art of film and stuff, and animation is just a lot of people can kind of might see it as a subset of film, but I feel like I would agree with Del Toro. Animation in its own right is definitely a genre, a medium. It's a medium that you can use however you want, whether it's 2D or 3D, or stop motion or rotoscoped. You can use animation in any way you want to tell whatever story you want.
Yeah, and that is a great way, to sum it up. Because, like, there's, so much you can do with animation. It can just be more than just one thing, either for kids or for adults or for anyone, really. Ideally, that's what you want, is to make sure, like, it's a story that can be enjoyed by many. And, Del Toro is a champion of that. And, I'm with it, too. Because there's a lot of stuff, like, even now, whether it be, like, anime, Disney, whatever animated thing comes out right now, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go check that out, and then I come back, I'm like, oh, that was a good story. Because I mean, like, I guess I'm talking about the one that caught me off guard was how good Puss in Boots was.
Well, yeah, how that movie is kind of a sleeper hit, really. I guess. Because I guess Puss in Boots has always been a popular character within the Shrek franchise. That's how he got a spin-off movie in the first place with the first one. But with the way the second one has been sort of
Received,
yeah. I think, heck, it even like I know a lot of people have been comparing it to Into the Spider-Verse in terms of how its look, because it does have like I guess similar vibes to it in terms of stylistically, which I think is sort of a cool thing to think about. Like, oh yeah, Into the Spider-Verse, it's a 3D movie, but it heavily borrows from like the 2D aspects of making it look like a comic book. And there's several. I think I've seen clips of Puss in Boots where they do several moments where it does like they do more with the 3D animation that he's done in past stuff. Where I think, and I think it's just a thing with a lot of 3D animated stuff, is that they try to go with sort of semi-realism for things most of the time. Because 3D is you get closer to real life, instead of just 2D stuff. But I think with Puss in Boots and obviously with Spider-Verse, they sort of do lean on let's get it's animation. We can do whatever we want with this. Just because it's 3D doesn't mean we have to still be bound by the realism of like 3D objects. Let's just have fun with it. And that's kind of what I feel like Spider-Verse and this new Puss in Boots movie have done.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Especially, and again, like, just to end it off on this note, funny little story involving Into the Spider-Verse. I knew a guy who took his friend to go watch a new Spider-Man movie because he's like a big nerd. He likes Spider-Man. He went into it thinking it was a live action one, and he was like, "Oh no, it's animated." He comes out, "That was a good movie." It's like, yeah, animation can be good. Can be good.
Yeah, that definitely highlights that like
And I'll say this: we're not discrediting people who prefer live action because sometimes it's a little easier for them to relate to the emotions. But like, animation is meant to be, for everybody. And what you were gonna say?
no, I mean I was gonna say that that definitely shows that there are people out there that still view animation as just kid stuff, but no, it's more than that. It can be whatever you want it to be.
And I guess that's a good place to end this episode, guys. Thank you for checking this out. Be sure to follow us on all social media: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Geek Centurions. We are most active on Instagram. Where you'll find a link to all podcasts since we're officially part of like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, all the like. And you'll find a link to the YouTube where you can put a face to the voice. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, and we have a Patreon for any kind of support. And yeah, that's been us. It's been your boy Eli.
It's me, Joe.
You guys have a good one. Peace.